Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I want to start out by acknowledging the resilience of Montanans over the course of this pandemic. This virus has caused unprecedented challenges, and Montanans have gone to great lengths to meet those challenges. Montanans have continuously taken this virus seriously and have done their part to make it possible to gradually reopen the state and work toward a new normal. Main Street and retail businesses, many of them have reopened under new guidelines to keep workers and customers safe. And this week, restaurants, bars, and other establishments are beginning to reopen as well. As we continue to move forward with the plan to reopen Montana, I'm again reminding Montanans that social distancing is incredibly important to continue maintaining and confining COVID-19. All of us must do our part to stay open and to progress to the next phase of the plan. We need all Montanans to stay vigilant in washing their hands, staying home when sick, and certainly getting tested when any symptoms might occur, and wearing non-medical masks in places that are difficult to practice social distancing. Older adults and those with compromised immune systems should continue to stay home as much as possible. Under the guidelines for reopening, restaurants, bars, and other establishments are certainly different at this point than we are used to before COVID-19. Capacity must be limited to 50% of normal operating capacity to allow for distancing between groups, and a maximum of 6 people can occupy a table. Many businesses are removing tables or creating physical barriers to meet these new guidelines. Additionally, sitting or standing at bars or counters is currently not allowed, and food and drinks must be served to customers at tables. As restaurants, bars, and other establishments have identified how they can begin to meet the requirements to reopen, I imagine that new policies and protocols will vary from place to place. For example, some establishments are using walkie-talkies so employers can communicate when a restaurant is at capacity, while others are strongly encouraging reservations to manage their capacity. I'm pleased that businesses are being thoughtful and creative to carefully reopen, but I also understand that it'll take some time to adjust. Certainly encouraging our fellow Montanans to be patient as businesses implement new protocols and train their staff to continue providing services while keeping employees and customers safe. Also call on my fellow Montanans to treat your bartenders and servers with kindness as they adjust to this new normal with the rest of us. If they tell you that they're at capacity or that you aren't following their protocols, please listen. They're protecting themselves and they're protecting you. Well, I'm pleased to see many Montanans adapting. I know a significant portion of our workers, businesses, and economic sectors have been financially impacted by this emergency and need assistance now. It's been more than 5 weeks since the President signed the CARES Act into law in response to COVID-19. Shortly after that legislation was signed and Montana was notified that it would be receiving $1.25 billion to support workers, businesses, and sectors of the community impacted by the virus, I put together a coronavirus relief advisory group. The group included representation from small business, agriculture, nonprofits, economic development organizations, financial institutions, and others to share their expertise and guidance on ways to deploy these funds responsibly. The advisory group began its work before it received the long-awaited federal guidance on allowable uses of the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And we finally received that guidance less than 2 weeks ago. Just last Friday, and only 2 weeks after forming the advisory group, I received a report with recommendations on ways to deploy the money given to Montana through the CARES Act and to help start putting Montana on a long-term path to economic recovery. I asked the advisory group to examine all sectors of the economy, consider the needs of each region of the state, and do their due diligence to ensure that no sector is left out. Because the funding comes with latitude, I asked the group to identify ways to utilize that funding in innovative ways and provide immediate relief to where it might be needed most. We also solicited feedback from the public, and the group reviewed and considered more than 1,400 comments. Certainly want to thank that advisory group, those members, again, for doing thorough work with a quick turnaround, because they understand how critical it is that we start getting some of these dollars out into our communities. And Montanans have made it clear that we must step in and do everything possible to ensure that small businesses can responsibly reopen, that nonprofits can continue to serve our communities, that homeowners can stay in their homes, and Montanans most in need have access to services. We're all in this together, and I know that Montana will emerge from this challenge even stronger than before. So I'm pleased today to announce the first round of emergency grants to support families, small businesses, nonprofits, health services centers, and individuals across Montana most impacted by COVID-19. Beginning this Thursday, so Thursday, May 7th, Montanans who are out of work, families who have limited resources, small businesses, nonprofits, and others can apply for $123 million in CARES Act funds across 9 new grant programs. We know that our Main Street and our small businesses are what really makes our community strong and vibrant. The Montana Business Stabilization Grant Program will provide up to $10,000 in working capital for Montana-owned small businesses with 50 or fewer employees who have lost revenue due to COVID-19. The Montana Innovation Grant Program will help companies scale up, improve capabilities, or drive distribution of products or services developed in response to COVID-19. Nonprofit and for-profit businesses with less than 150 employees are eligible for grants up to $25,000. We will support the agriculture industry, a key industry in our state, through the Montana Food and Agriculture Adaptability Program. Grants of up to $10,000 will be provided to food and ag businesses to increase community resilience during the pandemic, and could include projects focused on accessing new markets, expanding local food systems, or business adaptations that decrease food and ag waste. It certainly is critical that Montanans impacted by COVID-19 can remain in their homes. The Emergency Housing Assistance Program will provide rent, security deposits, mortgage payments, and hazard insurance assistance as needed for Montanans who've lost a job or lost substantial income as a result of the pandemic. Montana Housing will pay the difference between 30% of the household's gross monthly income and their eligible housing assistance costs up to $2,000 a month. Household income limits range from $75,000 to $125,000 based on family size. And as I announced last week, a $5 million fund will support local and tribal health departments as well as urban tribal health centers to respond to COVID-19 in their communities. As we continue to ask older adults to stay home and continue to suspend visitation in our nursing homes to minimize exposure, the Stay Connected grants will provide funds to reduce social isolation among older adults. Grants ranging from $500 to $2,000 will provide for technologies and other efforts to ensure seniors can connect with their loved ones while maintaining social distance. Another program, telework assistance grants, will provide up to $1,000 per individuals toward purchasing equipment to assist Montanans with disabilities access telework equipment. This assistance will ensure people with disabilities have the equipment needed to adapt to the change in working environments. We also know that it's critical that all Montanans have access to nutritional foods during this time. Assistance to food banks and food pantries will provide applicants up to $50,000 to increase food security for Montanans hit hard by COVID-19. And grants up to $10,000 will be available for nonprofit organizations to continue to provide the services Montanans rely on, especially as we work toward economic recovery. These 9 programs announced today will join the state's suite of existing support services and direct federal appropriations to ensure that we can begin both a short and long-term path toward economic recovery. I want to be clear that this is just an initial round of funding based on the immediate needs identified by Montanans and small businesses. There'll certainly be additional funding announced in the future, and we'll closely monitor the demand for this first round of emergency grants to adjust as needed and ensure Montanans are getting relief. Grants can be applied for using one portal at covidrelief.mt.gov. The application will go live at 8 a.m. on Thursday, May 7th. The Departments of Commerce, Department of Public Health and Human Services, and the Department of Agriculture will begin reviewing applications as they come in, and we'll get the funds out as quickly as possible. Strongly encouraging Montanans who think they may be eligible to visit covidrelief.mt.gov to learn more about the programs. Montana businesses should use this time before the application opens to gather the materials to apply, including their tax ID, proof of business registration, brief description of how the grant will be used, and a brief description of how COVID-19 has impacted their operations. Homeowners and renters should have bank account information available and verification of job or income loss. As we look, and I guess I'd also note, joining me up here along with the Lieutenant Governor is Tara Rice, who's the Director of the Department of Commerce, and Amy Sassano, who's Deputy Budget Director. They can also answer questions, but also really appreciate their work as well as the work of others, both in providing some support for that advisory group and then figuring out how we actually operationalize this so we can get this up and running by this Thursday. As we work to deploy these dollars as quickly as possible to support Montanans and businesses alike during these times, we're also continuing the work to implement the testing framework that I unveiled last week. We've heard from nursing care centers and assisted living communities across our state, and in partnership with those who care for our older adults, are helping to offer testing to all staff and residents. This week, we've been consulting facilities across our state about this logistical undertaking. We'll begin limited testing this week to help spot check for any issues and as we scale to reach further facilities in the weeks to come. On a call yesterday with the Vice President and the nation's governors, I was asked to share our testing approach for Montana's nursing homes and receive the continued word of commitment from the Vice President and senior administration officials. They'll provide the supplies we need to help reach our testing targets. Continue to make sure that this commitment is taken seriously by our federal partners. Stay-at-home order also brought us time to ramp up our testing capacity and make sure that we can secure additional testing supplies. It allowed us to find the adequate personal protective equipment supply chains on the private side and in partnership with the federal government. As Montana continues what is now a month-long decline in cases, I will reiterate that this is still not the time to let our guard down. What we did to suppress this virus in Montana during the stay-at-home order worked. And as we gradually begin to reopen, we need to act much of the same as we did when greater restrictions of the stay-at-home order were in place. With our careful actions, we can continue to move forward in containing the virus rather than have to concern ourselves with taking steps backwards. We'll now open it up for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can press 5*. You'll be notified that your hand's raised. When we unmute your phone, you'll be notified that you've been called on to ask your question. First phone question.
Hey, Governor Bullock, it's Olivia. I was with NBC Montana. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
So you said there will likely be other rounds of funding. Do you know exactly how many and when we can expect those other rounds of grants to roll out?
Sure. So the question was, I said that there will be other rounds or grant programs. When exactly can we expect those to roll out? A couple of different things, one of which is that as we put these out to, even with the target at $123 million, we want to assess what's needed, what may not, what may be oversubscribed, with the possibility of even augmenting additional dollars to these. And we'll, in relatively short order, as we consider both the recommendations of the advisory group and those 1,400 comments, look at additional programs that we might want to do, and that there may be a real need for there. We still anticipate additional federal guidance as far as how this money can be used. And as there's discussions in Washington, D.C. about what another package might look like, we also want to ensure that what we do isn't going to duplicate or replicate what might be done at the federal level. The restrictions through these dollars were that it needs to be used by the end of this calendar year. And one of the things that the advisory group was real strong on was saying that let's actually see how things are going here. And there should be a good portion of this money set aside for the immediacy to see how things are going for our state and our economy as things open up. So there's no immediate timeline on here's when additional grants or additional programs will be coming out. Next phone question. Ooh.
Hey, Governor, this is Holly. How are you doing?
I'm good, Holly. How are you?
Hey, it's going okay. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you settled on this dollar amount for the initial round of emergency grants, and if there's any estimate on what demand will be and how long the funding that's allocated now might last for.
So the question was, how did we settle upon these dollar targets right now, and any sense of how long this funding will last, whether things will be oversubscribed or others. I mean, by and large, both from taking the recommendations of the advisory group, working with Department of Commerce, the Budget Office, other state agencies, we made estimates of what we thought this might actually be. And to a degree, looking at it from a perspective of food banks as an example of saying, if we gave, those that were eligible up to 50K each, what would the overall sort of subscription or capacity be there? But they're estimates, and that's one of the things that we want to see with each of these programs of what the demand is, how they're utilized, and then we'll use that to make determinations about whether additional dollars need to be flowing into these 9 programs. Another phone question.
Hi, Governor Bullock. It's Maritza with NBC Montana. I'm wondering if you have a response to this new report out critical of states like ours, Wyoming, Hawaii, and Alaska, for getting as much federal money that we did for COVID-19 related expenses.
Yes, so Maritza, I guess I haven't seen that report, but a couple different things. One of which is what we got was the congressional minimum, so that every state got a minimum of $1.25 billion. Then it went up from that perspective, based on, I think, is population. There's also a piece that it's often, when someone turns around and says to me, well, I can't believe that Montana gets all these federal highway dollars when we're a state of 147,000 square miles, and some states, even with larger populations, could fit into one of our counties. That I think that it recognizes first a bare minimum that each state should get, and then taking a look at sort of the geographic both breadth of Montana, the diversity of small communities and large. It only makes sense from my perspective. Another phone question.
Hi, this is Nikki Willett with Yellowstone Public Radio. Thanks so much for holding the call. Given our current economic struggle and funding levels, do you expect the state to be in a financial deficit heading into the next legislative session next year? And separately, is there anything in your plan that would give funding or relief to people who don't feel safe going back to work, especially if they're people that are vulnerable to the virus, if their employer, for example, is saying you have to come back to work?
So, 2 things. Given where we are right now, do you anticipate a deficit or a challenge going into next legislative session? And the second, is there anything in this package that for individuals that might feel less than comfortable going back to work because they're vulnerable, that it would provide assistance to them? To the first question, that, look, I mean, we left our last legislative session with $300 million in the bank, in excess of everything that, the budget. We left with a $100 million budget stabilization or account, about $70 million in fire funding. So relative to many other states, I think Montanans can be pleased that even in a time of global pandemic, we're still paying our bills, and we're still actually having an expectation of not having a bond rating change and things like that. With that said, and one of the things with the COVID-19 or the CARES Act dollars, one of the things that it said both for state and local governments, that it couldn't replace any losses of revenues. There continues to be discussion at the federal level on either allowing some of this $1.25 billion to do so, or another CARES package. And governors from Republican and Democrat states alike, and it was just raised again on the call that I had yesterday by a number of governors, stating that if you can't have a strong and vibrant economy if governments can't provide the services that Montana or that Americans expect. And unlike the federal government, states can't run deficits. So I know that there's a lot of discussion at the federal level about what additional dollars to make up for some of those lost state and local revenues might be. And I'll certainly stay abreast of that. The second question would be that to the extent that, is there anything in these 9 programs, if an employee feels vulnerable, that it would pay them for them effectively not to go back to work? First and foremost, under all of the guidance that we put out, that there's an expectation that employers make accommodations for those vulnerable individuals. And to the extent that an issue arises, that at the end of the day, and I think Brendan Nordland, the Commissioner of Labor and Industry, made that pretty clear I think it was last week, unemployment insurance isn't decided by the employer, it's actually adjudicated by the Department of Labor. So we'd certainly look at that as one of the factors along the way. But Montana businesses, they're in this both to keep their employees and their customers safe. Certainly expect them to make accommodations for vulnerable populations. And there isn't anything in these 9 programs that would pay an individual if they feel that they haven't, actually those accommodations haven't been met. Another phone question.
Hello, Eric Dietrich. Eric Dietrich of the Montana Free Press here. Hope you're doing well. So one couple questions. First is, will the identity of the folks who get money through the business programs in particular be public? And then also, how will applications be prioritized if it turns out that there isn't enough money to go around, even in this initial phase?
So the questions were, will the applicants that get money, will that be publicly identified? And second of which, what's the prioritization structure if there's insufficient money? Still decide, probably it will be on a program by program basis as far as the identities, like individuals that receiving rent assistance. I think what we'll probably do is aggregate by community, not by individuals. And that we're still going through as far as what will be disclosed from the business grants, but I would anticipate that will end up publicly posted. And the second question, I'll turn it over to Tara Rice, the Director of the Department of Commerce, as far as prioritization. But that's one of the things, though. The question also presupposes that we're going to run out of money in these, and what we want to do is see what the subscription, what the uptake is, before setting hard and fast deadlines of saying this is all the money that will be in that program. But when it comes to prioritizing, Director Rice.
Hi, Eric. This is Tara Rice, Director of the Department of Commerce, and thank you again, Governor, for letting me get into the weeds on this a little bit. Eric, one of the biggest priorities with this program is to get the dollars out as quickly as we can to support businesses and not make it more complex than it needs to be. So many businesses in the state right now are struggling to keep it together and to make ends meet. And it's really designed to be simple and something that they can access with speed. I know that's always, as the federal programs have rolled out, that's been attention, and it's been a big priority with this program. So that is a #1 priority. In terms of how to, make sure that we're trying to target to the businesses who are most in need, one thing that we're doing is prioritizing businesses who haven't yet been able to access other sources of funding that's become available. So for the PPP program and the EIDL program that have made loans available, 2 federal programs through the Small Business Administration that have made loans available to businesses in the state, businesses who've received loans from the SBA are not ineligible, but they will be, the priority is such that businesses who haven't yet been able to access those other programs are a higher priority within this program. So there's some measures we're taking to try to make sure that we can get funds out as quickly as possible to businesses who are most in need.
Okay, thank you.
Next phone question.
Yes, Governor. This is Casey Elliott, Dillon Tribune. sort of along the lines of the previous question, will there be some kind of a board or some such that will be keeping tabs on the accountability for all these, making sure that these programs go to the right places?
So I think the question was, what sort of accountability program will there be to make sure that these grants go to the right places? And certainly and there's fairly extensive putting out of what it takes to apply and also FAQs along the way. So expectation is, as far as for each individual business, there's actually qualifications that will set forth what one needs to do, and that there will be then, it's subject to legislative audit and everything else along the way. Do you want to add anything else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Governor. This is Tara Rice, Director of the Department of Commerce again. So these are federal funds that are directed to the state to put out, and one of the federal guidance that we expect to get are what are the federal reporting requirements on it. So like any other federal program any other federal funds that the state receives, the federal government will direct us on what oversight and reporting requirements we need to comply to for these funds. So that's, as I understand it, that's guidance that we expect to still be forthcoming from the federal government.
Another phone question.
Hi, Governor. This is Amy Hansen with the Associated Press.
Hi, Amy.
Hi. Hey, I'm wondering, of course, all the times that we've had these websites that all of a sudden, boom, you can apply for something at a certain time beginning this morning at 8 o'clock. Are we expecting it to be able to handle the traffic, or are there just going to be glitches just due to volume, because that's just how it is?
Well, as we've done with every one of them, that there could well be glitches due to volume. I think that we're anticipating that there could be a large subscription or a lot of people trying to apply, so doing everything that we can on that side. Also, we are tasking getting some individuals from even other state agencies to come over and provide assistance as well as we get these grant programs up and running. Final phone question. Holly, you're back.
Hey, sorry. I am wondering, kind of jumping topics here, but I wonder if the federal government or Vice President has given you a timeline on providing the testing supplies that we would need to meet targets. Is there any specificity out of that, or is it more just commitment at this point?
So even between the time, I guess that we rolled that out last Wednesday, my weeks sort of start to blend together at times, but I had a number of phone calls both with CMS, from folks from CDC, FEMA as well, that there are a number of different facets to this, right? One of which is just the swabs and the viral transport medium. Brought that up on the call when I was called to share our program with the federal coronavirus task force and the governors. I said, that's one of my expectations, is that I need to have at least 2 weeks supply of swabs and viral transport medium. Been assured that that will be the case. And I think the Indeed even said yesterday that I should be getting 50,000 swabs and close to that in viral transport medium along the way this week alone. So the same happens with both the testing kits, and as we ramp up to that higher number, just as our state lab's been able to certainly handle all the capacity that has been necessary up to this point, but we're planning on sending some each day to reference laboratories out of state. And we've been working on making sure that sort of that commitment from the reference laboratories to take a specific supply from Montanans each and every day is firmed up. So it's a long way to say that I've certainly not only requested, but demanded that as we meet these testing targets, that we'll get what we need from the federal government, and we'll continue to do everything that I can to make sure that that's honored.
Governor John Riley, Montana Television Network. So applications open up Thursday. When will money actually start going out?
Do you want it, Amy? Come on. Come on, Amy.
I'm too short. Amy Sassano, I'm the Deputy Budget Director for Governor Bullock. Our goal is as soon as possible, and we don't want to make commitments that we can't fulfill, but we anticipate within 10 to 15 business days.
And then just a quick follow-up with agriculture. I believe $10,000 was allocated to each business. That's a pretty small amount for ranches that cost $1 million and have to make mortgage payments, and that's about 3 cows worth of profit.
So the grants that are going to the Department of Agriculture are specifically for adapting their businesses to be able to meet the new demands of a COVID-19 world. And so those are not intended to be business lifelines in the same way that the other business grants are. I think the Agriculture Department will analyze the requests that they get and see if that amount is sufficient and make adjustments if necessary.
Anybody else? Well, thank you very much for joining us. Make sure that there's hopefully the vast majority of the questions about these programs you'll be able to see just by looking at the website, and we'll keep you updated on how it goes. Thanks so much.